Okay. So there are some, so I think we already kind of talked about what can cause things like ADHD, autism, and epilepsy, and knowing that genetics is actually a big cause of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some also, research, and people have already asked about this, diet-based, artificial dyes and things like that have also been associated with an increased risk of developing ADHD and autism, not epilepsy.
ومثل ما قلنا إنه الفلتر حركة أو نقص الانتباه والتوحد، الأكل له علاقة إنه يزيد الأعراض أو يقللها، بس مش الصرع.
Okay. And just a little thing about vaccines and autism. No. So the person who came up with that research was proven to have fabricated that research. He made it up, and all of those papers have been pulled from the medical literature.
الشخص اللي قال إنه العلاقة في علاقة بين اللقاحات والصرع أو التوحد طلعت بلاغ كاذب زي ما بيقولوا، فأصلاً انسحبت الأوراق اللي يطلعها ويعتبر مذنب. فلهذا زادت حالات الأمراض الانتقالية بسبب إنه الناس بطلت تطعم أطفالها أو تلقحهم، والله لا يصير عنده توحد أو يصير عنده صرع، بس هو ما له علاقة.
Now, there is a link between one specific vaccine and an increased risk of seizures, and that is the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella. And basically, so that has been associated with an increased risk of fever with seizure in children who are of that age.
ففي تطعيم واحد اللي هو اللي ياخذوا الأطفال، I'm sure كلكم أمهات بعمر الشهرين 4 أشهر 6 أشهر، اللي هو الحصبة والحصبة الألمانية. هذا له علاقة هسه إنه بحالات الصرع، بس الصرع بسبب ارتفاع درجات الحرارة من اللقاح، فهذا الوحيد اللي.
How do vaccines work though? How do y'all know vaccines work? Exactly. How do we do that?
Stop getting sick.
No, how does it work though?
كيف تشتغل في جسمك؟
Yeah, so this is how it works.
Isn't it like you get injected with the virus?
So it's similar. Now you're about to go to a boxing match, right? And I'm the boxer. I'm boxing Muhammad Ali, right? So the first time I'm boxing him, or somebody that looks like him, I probably won't win, right? But the second time it comes up, do I know his moves? Do I know what he looks like? So this is what vaccines do. They expose the body to either something similar to the virus or something expressed by the virus, but in a weakened form. So we're talking about Muhammad Ali at 70 years old. So when 20-year-old Muhammad Ali comes back at me, I know how to fight. So that's how vaccines work. By taking a component. Sometimes it's the virus, but do you think they give you the live virus fully alive? They make, even if it says it's slightly alive, it's called attenuated, it's weakened. So it's like a 70-year-old boxer. But most viruses are not live vaccines. They're proteins or they're toxins. So when the body has been exposed to the real fighter, it knows its moves and how to outmaneuver. Do you have questions? Yeah, so vaccines, that's how they work. So how many people, go ahead.
Well, why are there like triple vaccines? Like when our kids were growing up at 26 years old, back then, there were like a couple vaccines here and there. But nowadays, they're like triple. They're giving them,
So we used to have, well, measles is a pretty old vaccine. Polio is extremely old vaccine. Polio came out when my mom was a child. But now, what if you're above 40, the vaccines you got were for measles, mumps, and rubella. You got tetanus, you got polio. What other vaccines do we have now that we added? COVID, Yoda. How many people had chickenpox?
Not me.
So you had chickenpox. How many children have had chickenpox? How many people less than 18 have had chickenpox? No, now.
Less than 18. Yeah.
No, you don't see it. Do you see polio? Unfortunately, it's come back. Where did it come back?
Because people stop vaccinating.
Well, it's mandatory.
It is.
What's the book people from? Back to the United States.
The unvaccinated.
Specific. Yeah, but they're even a specific group. It showed up again in New York,
Mhm.
because the Hasidic Jewish community doesn't vaccinate.
Oh.
So a young 24-year-old male member, went and traveled somewhere, and he brought polio back to the United States. So before that, we didn't have polio, we were eradicated, but one man brought it back.
But does it affect the vaccine?
So for every physical, as in we can see the person has polio, there's 1,000 people that have been infected. So
I didn't.
polio causes a type of paralysis. So
What are all the extra
So-
vaccines that they added on?
the chicken pox,
Meningitis.
the meningitis,
Mhm.
the.
HPV,
Oh,
HPV,
HPV for older children. I'm thinking about the little people.
flu vaccine.
Flu, who's talking about old vaccines?
Pneumonia, I think they
Yeah,
start.
pneumococcal vaccine. So there's 3 vaccines that have been added that prevent meningitis.
Sorry, but I just not got it.
The new one.
Okay, so
It always calls it.
I would so you have to make a decision. The HIV
Yeah, my internet.
and the pneumococcal vaccine prevent brain infections. So you have to decide if you want to take that risk for your child.
Yeah.
They prevent meningitis. And I think that's a pretty serious.
And I will say the most severe cases of things like meningitis, pneumonias, and sorry, what was the other one that I was looking at? The most severe cases are going to happen in children who are not vaccinated for it, and it does happen. You might think your child is lucky, but I'm
Mhm.
telling you,
It's
it
a very-
happens,
and
it's
no,
devastating.
And it's
It's
long
devastating.
term. It's long term.
Mhm.
I mean, if a child has meningitis, there's long term consequences.
And there's adults that can, right?
And adults can get
Yeah.
meningitis too.
Yeah.
But they have to do
Absolutely.
it for 18.
But-
That's why, yeah.
Yeah.
There's vaccines we get so that, like, I love to talk about vaccines, I'm sorry, guys. It's
Yeah,
not
go for
cheap.
it.
But anyway, even if I'm not vaccinated and I'm standing in the middle of the table with everybody who's vaccinated, am I gonna get sick? I don't have the vaccine, but everyone around me has the vaccine. Can I get the disease? No.
No.
No, why?
It's the herd immunity, right?
Herd immunity, because everyone else is protecting me. And so you have to make a decision, sometimes,
Herd immunity always attenuated virus, right?
no,
No,
herd immunity has to do with the ability of of an infection, the likelihood, the probability, the gamble of finding an uninfected person. So, I mean, not uninfected, unprotected person. So when you make a decision to get a vaccine, it's not just about you or your child, it's also about protecting other people in the community who can't get a vaccine. The amazing thing about the pneumonia vaccine, pneumococcal, is because the children have been vaccinated, we actually, as adults, are now protected. So subhanAllah, the one vaccine, because we initiated it, giving it to children, the pneumococcal vaccine, that they spread their protection to us. Yeah, it's interesting, like, that's the only vaccine that occurs, that is the pneumococcal vaccine. Yeah, go ahead.
all right, I'm just going to open up the floor to some questions. I know there are a few in the audience. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
That there was such an increase in percentage of autism from, I forgot how many years it was.
2000.
Since 2000, being that it's in the 300%. What could it be? Is it environmental changes? Could it be that the vaccines are being changed? Or what?
So I think for that, it's more, again, like with the ADHD, we're more likely to look for it and diagnose it. Instead of saying, oh, this person is kind of strange, we're more
Mhm.
likely to start looking for it. We've been trained to look for it. Educators, pediatricians have been trained to look for it
What
more.
about autism? That's something that's.
No, that's what I'm saying for both. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I feel like vaccines, that it could possibly be a change maybe.
No, vaccines are
No.
old.
Mhm.
Like,
Well,
vaccines are before my time.
Like
Yeah.
before, they used to take the vaccine, but you don't have the ability to. I bet you most of our, I wouldn't say most, elderly people, grandparent or elderly uncle, they have autism, but at their time, nobody see it. Like
Yeah.
they'll say, oh, he's just like she said, he's
A
just
little
strange,
Yeah,
or
there's
he's just
different.
hyperactive, or you know.
Ability
But
to
now they
diagnose.
diagnose them. They consider them as a disease.
Is it
genetic? And if it is, like, which side, the mom or the dad, which you don't know?
I thought, twins tend to,
For which?
for autism.
That I'm not
No?
sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I would have
I'm
to go
not
back
sure.
and look on the data. So there's in a lot of these disorders, there's a genetic link, but then there are also ones that can just spontaneously develop in a child.
What did you say about?
No, that's what I'm saying. If there's some diseases that you will see repeated patterns if you have twins. I know for adult brain diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, it's definitely genetic. But that's why we brought a pediatric neurologist for the child. But I know for some neurological diseases of adults, there's a large genetic component.
And those was I.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm not saying having twins doesn't make you more likely to have autism. No.
Okay, next. Mhm.
Say that one more.
How can autism affect the children who have Williams syndrome?
So he's interested about the impact of autism and Williams.
Yeah, that is something very specific that I actually would have to read more about and get back to you. Okay. Yeah.
He's interested, are there any studies or cures going toward the seizures to make them stop in Williams?
So they're not cures, but there are things that you can do to have a decreased likelihood of having a seizure,
Yeah.
right? So those are making sure you're getting enough sleep, making sure you're eating well, you have a good routine, and you're taking your medication regularly. Yeah.
Oh.
Like, let's say if the making tired, so most likely it's second brain surgery.
Okay,
And to maybe most likely what I need to do.
that's possible.
Mhm.
Because my mother did tell me that most people when they turn 22 or 23, they stop having seizures then.
That's a good question. Can you grow out of a seizures when you're an adult? This is
So
a-
usually if you're going to grow out of it, it will happen by puberty.
Usually by around age 13 or 14.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it didn't stop by puberty, it's probably not. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Yes,
Yeah,
Sister
for
Maria.
attention deficits,
Uh-huh.
not ADHD.
Mhm.
Because I know some children
Mhm.
just attention deficiency are not hyperactive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And-
ADD, not
Yeah.
ADHD. Mhm.
Yeah, and they're facing too much troubles in learning and education.
Mhm.
And I know some of them, whenever the mom took them to the pediatrician, they are not diagnosed for
Mhm.
ADD. And what is the criteria to make the pediatrician diagnose it?
Okay,
Because
yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, and I did kind of touch on this earlier. There are basically the teacher and the parent have to fill out scales. It has, in order to get the diagnosis of ADHD, you have to prove that the child has difficulty in multiple different environments, right? It's not just the child who is ADHD or ADD because they just don't want to do, what you're trying to make them do.
does
Yeah.
not do following the task.
Yes.
Keep forgetting everything.
Mhm.
This is the
Yeah, so
main
there's going to
complaint.
be, and yeah, so it's a formal diagnosis. There's actual formal paperwork and formal, what we call diagnostic
Yeah,
criteria
like we
for
said, it's
that.
not only the pediatrician, the neurological pediatrician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so no, so for autism, you need a neurologic pediatrician. For ADD, your pediatrician can diagnose it, but they have to get information from the kid's teacher and from the parents. So if the kid is only, say, for example, let's say it's misbehaving. Say they're only having trouble paying attention or completing tasks at home, but they're doing fine in school, then that's not ADD. That is a behavior problem that you have to work on at home. Or say it's the opposite and they're having trouble at school, but they're not having trouble at home, then that's also a behavior problem you have to work on at school. So it is, there are people who are trained to get this diagnosis.
So how do we, like, if it's just a behavior rather than just a condition, how do we know about that?
So it's like I said, so we have what we call diagnostic criteria. So it's not going to be just one thing or two things. It's going to be multiple things that they have to fit in order to get this
I don't know,
diagnosis.
but I mean, like, who, like, if it's just a behavior, like, do I still go to the pediatrician for that?
Yes, go to the pediatrician for it. And, bring up your concerns and they will do an evaluation for it.
So does Asperger's syndrome hit the spectrum of autism?
Yes.
Because autism, I see that it's a really big umbrella and they put so many things under.
Yes.
Isn't that the cause of the percentage going up every year because they just put everything in?
Because there's a
I'm not saying
changing,
everything in anything, but how is that Asperger's syndrome, which I'm asking specifically about, how is it associated with autism?
so it is a type of autism spectrum disorder. Yeah,
So-
it's what we call high functioning autism. So these are the kids who go through, schooling, they're not having any trouble at school, they're very good with their work, but they don't have friends. Yeah, so these are the kids who are, you're like, okay, well, they seem almost completely normal, but there's something about them that's a little bit off. And those are the kids who have autism, right?
So in the
I'm sorry,
meantime-
Asperger's.
So in the meantime, my children got referred to the autism clinic to get evaluated and all. Oh my God, the waiting list is until next year.
Yeah. it is very
So
long.
in the meantime, what do you recommend me as a parent to do with them?
How old are they?
I have a 13-year-old and a
9-year-old. Okay, so basically at that time, I would just get the IEP evaluation from the school. Yeah, and until you can get the formal autism. Yeah. Occupational therapy, ABA therapy, but in order to do ABA, you have to have the diagnosis of autism.
Right.
Yeah. But yes, so just getting therapies at school though can help.
So I have a combination of, so one is being referred to the autism, but there's a combination of ADHD and intellectual disability.
Mhm.
So, but you look at it and be like, how?
Yeah.
Me as a
Yeah.
parent, sometimes it's hard for me to deal with,
Yeah.
What do you, I don't even know how I'm gonna ask this question. Like, sometimes I'm short tempered with him. I mean, I know there are things he doesn't get, things he
Yeah.
doesn't do, but how am I supposed to I'm being patient.
I know.
But there are some things that are just out of my hand,
Yeah.
that he can do, So patience is not enough. What is something
I
that I could?
There's patience, which you have a limit because you're human. And then there's also just acceptance of this is going to be the way it is. This is what we're going to struggle with. And this is just the way the child is, and I cannot change them. There's just acceptance of that. I would recommend there are some support groups that you can find out there for, children. So, women who have children with autism, and I would just reach out and get a good social support group for that. Individual strategies, like you can go on and on with those, but it's going to depend on the child. So, I mean, I'm, inshallah, I like hope for the best outcome for them. And I know, you're obviously a very involved mother and you're doing your best. You have to, also forgive yourself. Like you're not going to be perfect. This is new for you, right? Okay. Any other questions? Are we good? Okay. Right. Do you want to talk maybe privately? Is it something to do with your epilepsy? Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. It was, really good talking to everyone. I guess if you have any sort of individual questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me. I can provide, I guess, my email address to Sister Sarah, and you can always, send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can with individual questions. And thank you. All right. I'm so sorry.